great to be here. I'm excited to be here at Imagine Talks, and I'm sure it's going to be more exciting than I ever even imagined. As Katie pointed out, I am the weather anchor on ABC 7 News. In fact, long before I came to the Bay Area, I did weather on Good Morning America for many years back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So since I am a weather forecaster, I'm happy that we are greeted this morning by a nice sunny day. One of the most inspiring quotes I've ever heard, maybe one of my favorite quotes in life, is from the late Senator Robert Kennedy, who was the younger brother of President John Kennedy. In a speech that he delivered when I was in college in the late 1960s, he said, "Some people see things as they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not." And that has stayed with me all these years, and I think it fits so perfectly into the theme of Imagine Talks, because what Robert Kennedy was saying to us is, imagine a better world, imagine a better you, imagine things that never were, and ask, why not? And that's what I think we should be all about here today, imagining what we can be, the best we can be, the best the world can be, and how we can make a difference. Now, over the years, I've come to realize that when I was a kid, my parents gave me lots of Imagine Talks. Seriously. Because imagination and dreams were the most powerful tools I had growing up that enabled me to overcome adversity, poverty, and racism. So I want to paint just a quick picture for you of what my early life was like. I was born and raised in the state of Virginia. I was born in 1947, so I'll be turning 71 this year. And I grew up under a system of racial segregation and discrimination that you've probably heard about, read about, or seen movies and documentaries about. It's called Jim Crow. And all of the states in what we call the South, and even some of the border states, for many, many years practiced Jim Crow laws. These were laws that segregated the races, and people of color were not able to go to restaurants and movie theaters or the schools of their choice or compete for jobs. In many cases, we couldn't vote. My parents grew up under this system their entire lives. It was in place until I was nearly 20 years old. So imagine a little kid having to find his way in the world and his parents having to explain why we can't go in that restroom where we're in the store where we're shopping, or we can't drink out of this water fountain, or we can't stop in the restaurant and get a sandwich after we finish shopping when you're hungry. We have to wait until we get home. This was daily life for me until I was almost 20 years old. This is what the Jim Crow system of racial segregation and discrimination was like in the South. I grew up in a rural area. We were poor. My parents were hard-working people. Neither of them had even had the opportunity to finish high school, but they instilled the most incredible values in their children. I'm going to show you a little picture here. Whoops. I'm going to go back and show you the picture I want to start with, which is, well, here it is. Okay. This picture was from about 1953 or 4. My mom and my dad, my little brother was 2.5. I was about 6.5. This is a picture of me when I was 11 in the 6th grade, and a picture of me at 17 graduating from high school. So how did I deal with the adversity and the indignities that we faced in the Jim Crow South? And how did I come through all that with a positive, hopeful attitude, believing that I could achieve something special in life? It was because of these two remarkable parents who taught my brother and me these sound values of hard work, of character, and integrity, and honesty, and determination. They instilled traditional Christian values in us and taught us to pray and to turn to God for guidance and for strength. And they pointed to things that were happening in the civil rights movement during my youth. Each night after dinner, as a family, we would watch the national news, and we would hear speeches from Martin Luther King, who, by the way, in his I Have a Dream speech, was basically giving an Imagine Talk. Imagine a better world. Imagine greater opportunity. Imagine racial justice. So we'd watch the news, and my parents would say, look at the progress being made in the civil rights movement. You see, opportunities are going to open up. People are going to become more accepting, more inclusive. The world is going to be a better place for you. And they were right. It became a better place for me. So when I was in college in the late 1960s, I watched this incredible change that was going on in our society. The civil rights movement, the women's movement, student activism. Young people were demonstrating against the war in Vietnam and were actively involved in political campaigns. And I decided I wanted to become a journalist. I wanted to be a news reporter and be a part of the media that covered these profound changes that were happening in our society. So out of college, with a degree in English and a minor in journalism, I applied for and auditioned for a job as a news reporter at a television station in Richmond, Virginia, which had been the capital of the Confederacy. Excuse me. I got the job, and suddenly here I was, just 2 years out of college, on the air, reporting the news. My parents could watch this on TV. They were so excited and so proud. And even then, though, although I just couldn't believe that this was happening, that my dream was coming true. I was becoming a journalist, a news reporter. Even then, though, I could not have, once again, imagined the path that my career would take and the amazing experiences I would have. So I started as a news reporter, and about 2 years after I started on the air doing news, the news director, the manager of the news department, came to me one day in a panic, and he said, "Our weatherman has just quit. And I know you've done some science reporting. Can you fill in on weather for 2 weeks while we look for a new weather person?" So I said, "Sure, I could do that." So I knew a lot about atmospheric science, so I filled in on the weather, talked knowledgeably about weather, even though at that time I wasn't a trained meteorologist. And within a short time, the ratings on our station went up, and I became recognizable. So the general manager of the station called me into his office, and he said, "You know, we'd like to keep you in that weather position because it's really boosted our ratings." And I said, "Oh, no, I'm a journalist. I do news. I don't do weather." And he said, "We could just about double your salary." I said, "I'm a weatherman." So I was a capitalist after all. So I began doing weather, and once again, I could not have imagined that that little shift in my career path would take me on this incredible journey. Within a few short years, I ended up on national TV with ABC and Good Morning America in New York. This was in the late 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, and it was more than a dream come true. Here in 1993, I'm interviewing Hillary Clinton, who was at that time First Lady, interviewing Muhammad Ali, the greatest, who became a friend of mine. Here I am with my buddy Oprah. This is a more recent picture from about 2008 or 9. I first met and interviewed former President Jimmy Carter back in the 1980s. We became friends over the years. I got to work with him and with his wife on Habitat for Humanity. You're familiar with that, right? And here I am with Janelle Wang, who was a co-host with me on a show just a few years back on ABC7 called The View from the Bay. So my travels, my assignments in my career on ABC have taken me to all 50 states, 5 continents. I've met and interviewed incredible people, not just famous people, lots of famous people, lots of newsmakers, but some of the most incredible people I've met have not been the rich and famous. They've been ordinary people who've done something extraordinary with their lives. And I have found that most of the people who achieve their dreams, who make what they imagine reality, are people who have these basic sound values, much like what my parents taught me. However, I didn't live just happily ever after reaching this level of success in my business. I experienced self-inflicted problems and adversity that almost cost me my family, my career, and could have cost me my life. Once I reached a certain level of prominence in my business, I got hooked on gambling. This happened early in my career, back in, about the late 1970s, early 1980s. There were assignments that had taken me to Las Vegas, and then there were social events that had taken me into gambling venues like Atlantic City casinos, Las Vegas casinos. And I just got hooked on that rush and that excitement of the casino life. And so the more I gambled, the more frequently I gambled, And the more money I put into play, as they say in casino parlance, the more the casinos were offering me complimentary treatment. Luxury suites, first-class airfare, gourmet meals, $1,000 bottles of wine. Everything was complimentary and on the house because they want the gamblers to keep coming back. So I got caught up in this high-roller lifestyle, and initially I thought it was just expensive entertainment. You know, I was expensive recreation. I would take my family out to Vegas on a vacation, and all expenses were paid. I would go to all the great shows and see all the great entertainment. Meanwhile, after my wife and kids went to bed, I was in the casino all night, staying up all night, gambling. And I started to fall into a deep, deep pit of debt. I was losing a lot of money. And I reached a point where I knew that I had a problem. I knew that this was a compulsion, an addiction, if you will. But I didn't want to acknowledge it because my pride got in the way. I was embarrassed. I didn't want the public or my friends or my colleagues or even my family to know that I was so foolish, that I was wasting, I was squandering everything I had worked all my life for, everything I had dreamed of and imagined and prayed for. I was just throwing it all away. I finally reached probably the lowest point in my life in 1999. My final contract at Good Morning America was expiring, and the management at ABC was building a new team, so my contract was not going to be renewed. It wasn't a bitter parting of the ways. I was certainly treated well by the company, but it was just time for me to move on. I was very fortunate. ABC 7 here in the Bay Area, which is an ABC-owned station, was aware that I was available and offered me a job here. So I thought, okay, I'll leave the network, I'll go back to local news, I'll get myself back together. But I still had all this gambling debt. I would estimate that over a period of about 25 years, I probably lost $3 million. And I was in deep, deep debt. I had taken out as many mortgages on my house as I could. I was still supporting my family, still paying the tuition when the kids were in college, still doing all those things that on the surface looked like responsible behavior, taking care of my family and my loved ones. But I had this mounting debt that was crushing me. I was losing sleep at night. I was just wondering, where can I turn next? What kind of loan can I get next? And the gambling was no longer fun. I was continuing to go to the casinos then because I was caught in that stupid gambler's disease of chasing losses, looking for that one big win, you know, that one winning streak that could turn things around. But the more I pursued those losses, the deeper the debt became. So now it's the end of 1999, or beginning of 1999, I beg your pardon. I'm moving to the Bay Area, my kids are out of the nest, and just before the move, my wife informed me that she wanted a different life. So she wanted a divorce. She didn't cite gambling as the only reason, but it certainly was one reason. So I moved here in 1999, and I was depressed. I felt defeated. And I was still a person of faith, still practicing my faith and praying every day and, you know, feeling close to God, and yet this one part of my life I didn't want to give up. I was locked into this disease, and I didn't want to give it up. Finally, not many years ago, about 5 years ago, my daughter, I mentioned that this one aspect of my life was spiraling out of control. My daughter confronted me with the fact that she was about to get married. And she said, Dad, she said, you know that, I have two kids, I have a son and a daughter. She said, you know that Jason and I love you dearly, we respect you, we admire you, but we hope you can turn your life around. She said, I'm going to have children someday. You're going to be a grandfather. Do you want your grandchildren to grow up knowing you as a gambler, as a man who squandered everything he had worked all his life to attain, a man whose family and career and possibly his life were destroyed by a gambling problem? She said, I hope you can get it together, Dad, because this shouldn't be your legacy. This shouldn't be the thing that defines who you are. You're more than this. You're greater than this. It was that talk that was the beginning of my turning my life around. So I started to think about what Jessica had said to me, and I started to think about the direction of my life and how I wanted to be remembered. And I started to think about my core values, those things that my parents had taught me as a kid, responsibility and integrity and character and faith. Why wasn't I turning this over to the one I believed in, who was the center of my life? This is a picture of me dancing with my daughter at her wedding, by the way. That's Jessica. This is a picture of me holding my firstborn grandson, Noah. So I started doing this soul searching, and when I had just about reached my lowest point with the gambling losses, I remember the very last day I was in a casino. It was nearly 5 years ago. I had had the talk with Jessica. I had been thinking, I was being haunted by her saying to me, you shouldn't let this be the thing that defines you and defines your life. And I remember walking out of that casino and going up to my hotel room and getting down on my knees and praying and asking God to please, please help me start carving out a new direction in my life and getting this monster off my back. Then I have, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that and after a period of years living here, after I moved here from ABC in New York, I remarried. So I walked out of that casino, I turned to God, I called my daughter, and then I called my wife. And I said, I think I'm finally ready to give this up. So she and I had this long soul-searching talk. She reminded me of the Imagine talks I had told her I had with my parents. She reminded me of those core values that had always guided my life. And she reminded me of what my daughter had told me about wanting my legacy to be something more than he wrecked his life in gambling. And all of a sudden, I knew that it was not going to be a part of my life anymore. It was like a single day in which I decided that I was going to imagine a different outcome for me. I was going to imagine a different direction for me. And I knew that I was able to make it happen. So my life has taken a very interesting path and has carried me on a very interesting journey. I overcame the early adversity in my life and achieved what many people would consider the good life. And yet I risked it all. I put it all on the line and just about threw it all away. And finally, when I returned to those core values and returned to the lessons that I learned from my parents' Imagine talks, I began to recapture the good life. So if there's anything that I want you to take away from this today, here I am on a return trip just a few years ago to Good Morning America. Here I am with Dan Ashley and Kristen Z, two of my current colleagues at ABC 7 News. By returning to those core values, the things that give your life meaning, the things that give your life purpose, and by pursuing that purpose with passion, you'll discover that it's never too late to begin turning your dreams into reality. And it is never too late to imagine a new you. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this Imagine Talks event today. And I hope that you will discover the new you that lies ahead.